So look around the room you're sitting in right now. I mean, it probably looks completely normal.
Yeah, totally ordinary.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
walls, the furniture, the space you occupy every single day, it all feels entirely normal. But according to the incredibly thought-provoking material we are unpacking today, you are actually sitting inside a prison.
Right, which sounds wild at first.
It does. But it's this prison with invisible walls that were built like the exact second you were born. And because they were already there when you arrived, you just never noticed them. You grew up inside this structure and completely mistook it for, well, the shape of reality itself.
It is such a phenomenal premise. And our mission for this deep dive is essentially to plan a jailbreak for you.
I love that. A
Yeah.
jailbreak.
Yeah. We are looking at a framework that suggests this prison isn't a physical place. Instead, it's a set of 3 deeply ingrained, invisible ideas that completely dictate how our culture understands suffering, success, freedom, and fault.
Like a silent operating system running in the background.
Yeah, exactly like that. They determine who we blame, who we forgive, and who we marginalize. And because they function as invisible premises rather than, arguments we can examine, they hold immense power over our daily lives. So the very first act of breaking out is simply running your hands along the walls and naming them.
Okay, let's unpack this, because diving into this material really forces you to reevaluate how you see everyday interactions. It's a complete paradigm shift. So let's go straight to that first invisible wall. It's known as the just world hypothesis.
Right, and to really grasp this first wall, try to observe your own mind in real time. Like, think about the last time you were scrolling through your news feed and saw a devastating story about an acquaintance or even a stranger.
Oh yeah, happens all the time.
Right, maybe they lost everything in a sudden bankruptcy, or they received a terrible medical diagnosis, or they were the victim of a violent crime. Just notice exactly what your mind does in that split second after processing the news.
It's actually a bit uncomfortable to admit, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's completely accurate. Before you've even consciously evaluated this situation, your brain is already on a search and rescue mission for a reason.
Yes, exactly.
You're subconsciously reaching for what they did wrong. You see a GoFundMe for medical emergency, and this tiny voice asks, well, were they eating terribly? Did they smoke? Why didn't they have better insurance?
Or if someone is assaulted, the mind immediately wonders, what neighborhood were they walking in at night? We desperately look for a flaw in their choices to explain the suffering.
Right.
And the psychological mechanism at play here is incredibly swift. The text has this great phrasing: a verdict essentially assembles itself before you've even called the court to order.
Wow. A verdict assembles itself. That's powerful.
It really is. And it's crucial to understand that this isn't a character flaw, right? You aren't doing this because you are callous or lacking empathy. It's just a deeply embedded cognitive reflex, and it runs in the exact opposite direction, too.
Yeah, that's the flip side of the coin. When we see someone who is incredibly wealthy, perfectly healthy, or, living this visibly successful life, our mind automatically extends them credit.
Right. We assume they earned it.
Exactly. We assume they made all the right choices, and therefore they inherently deserve the comfort they have. It's as if every human being has this internal accountant, and that accountant demands that the ledger always balances. Suffering must equal fault, and comfort must equal merit.
The accounts absolutely must come out even. But we have to look at why our brains are wired to do this. This balancing act is a profound defense mechanism against the terrifying reality of how the world actually functions.
Right, because the world is messy.
Very messy. The just world hypothesis is essentially a bargain with chaos. Think about the logic: if bad things only ever happen to people who somehow deserve them, people who made bad choices or weren't careful enough, then what does that imply for you?
Oh, I see. It implies that I'm safe.
Exactly. It implies that as long as you are good, careful, and follow the rules, you are perfectly safe from the randomness of the universe.
But hold on. I have to push back on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because if we write off all success or failure as just a bargain with chaos, aren't we kind of stripping away the value of genuine hard work?
That's a fair question.
Like, let's say someone studies for 10 years, skips parties, takes out heavy loans, and finally becomes a neurosurgeon. That's not a glitch in the universe. That is sustained, deliberate effort. When I see that colleague get a promotion and assume it's because they worked hard, I'm not just comforting myself against chaos, am I?
No, it is a completely fair challenge. No one is suggesting that effort doesn't exist or that studying for 10 years doesn't yield a result. The effort is very real.
Okay, good.
But the trap of the just world hypothesis is assuming that the capacity for that effort and the environment that allowed that effort to bear fruit were entirely generated by the individual in a vacuum.
Oh, I see.
When you look at the neurosurgeon, the ledger wants to say 100% of this outcome is due to their sovereign grit. But the ledger ignores the chaos that worked in their favor, a brain chemistry capable of sustained executive function, an environment secure enough to allow for study, or, simply not getting hit by a bus on the way to the entrance exam.
Right, right.
The just world hypothesis shields us from acknowledging how much of that success relied on variables utterly outside their control.
It reminds me of the underlying expectations we have when playing a video game. Like in a game, you expect a perfect one-to-one ratio of input to output.
Yeah.
You press the A button, your character jumps.
Right.
You press B, they duck. If you time the inputs perfectly, you win the level. If you mistime them, you lose. And the just world hypothesis is us desperately demanding that real life operates exactly like that game.
That is a great analogy.
We want our moral and practical inputs to perfectly match our life outputs. But the reality is, we are playing a game that is heavily glitched. Sometimes you press A perfectly, you do everything right, and the floor just drops out from underneath you anyway.
Not exactly. Or, conversely, someone barely touches the controller and just spawns at the finish line.
Right. And we refuse to admit the game is glitched because admitting it means accepting we aren't fully in control of our destiny.
That captures the anxiety perfectly. We completely refuse to admit the glitch. But to maintain the illusion that the game works perfectly, we have to enforce a second belief. If the ledger of blame and merit is going to function, we have to believe that human beings are entirely independently responsible for their inputs.
We have to be the sole authors of our actions.
Exactly. And that directly brings us to the second invisible wall in this structural prison.
Right. So the second wall is built on a philosophical concept called metaphysical libertarianism.
Huh.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, this has absolutely nothing to do with the political movement of libertarianism or, like, tax policy.
No, not at all.
We are talking strictly about the philosophy of free will. We are talking about the myth of the sovereign self.
Let's break down the mechanics of that myth. Metaphysical libertarianism is this demanding absolute claim that human will is a closed system, entirely free from prior causes.
Okay.
It's the belief that sitting right there behind your eyes is a sovereign self that stands completely outside the laws of cause and effect that govern the rest of the physical universe.
Which is a huge claim when you think about it.
It really is. It is the conviction that if we could rewind time to yesterday at 8:00 a.m. and place you in the exact same situation with the exact same arrangement of atoms, the exact same history, the exact same neurochemistry you could have chosen differently, it's the idea that you are the uncaused causer.
And it feels incredibly intuitive, doesn't it? Like, take something simple. Think about the exact breakfast you chose to eat this morning.
Okay.
When I decided to make oatmeal instead of toast, it felt like a completely isolated, independent choice.
Yeah.
I felt like the ultimate author of that moment.
Sure, from the inside, it feels that way.
But then you start looking at the mechanics of determinism,
Mm.
and you have to confront a massive list of things that make up your quote-unquote self that you absolutely did not choose.
The list of unchosen traits is staggering when you actually lay it out.
It really is. I mean, you didn't choose your brain structure. You didn't choose the family that raised you or the socioeconomic environment of your childhood that, like, physically wired your nervous system to respond to stress in a particular way.
Right, or the culture that handed you your core values before you were even old enough to speak.
Exactly. You didn't choose your baseline neurochemistry, which dictates your impulse control or how you perceive a cloudy day versus a sunny day.
You didn't even choose the specific gut microbiome that might be driving what you can't stop reaching for in the pantry at 2 in the morning.
Oh, man, the 2 a.m. cravings. Yeah, it's wild.
Well, what's fascinating here is what happens when you rigorously track back the causes of any decision you make. The originating agent, that sovereign self that is supposed to be independently pulling the levers, it just keeps retreating.
It keeps getting pushed further back.
Right. You look behind your choice to eat oatmeal,
Yeah.
and you find a prior condition. Maybe a subconscious memory of a health article you read, interacting with your current blood sugar levels. You look behind those conditions, and you find another one. Biology, environment, history, trauma, culture.
So the sovereign self isn't actually initiating anything.
No, it isn't the first thing in the chain initiating the action. It turns out to be an illusion masking a very long chain of prior causes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because it's incredibly easy to hear this breakdown of cause and effect and fall straight into fatalism.
Oh, absolutely.
You might think, okay, well, if everything is preceded by a cause I didn't choose, then nothing matters. I'm just a meat robot, and my choices are a complete illusion. But the material we are exploring makes a very careful, razor-sharp distinction to guard against that exact thought.
It is a vital distinction. The experience of weighing your options is entirely real. Your deliberation is a real biological process, and the choices you ultimately make genuinely shape what happens next in the physical world.
Right, your choices have actual consequences.
Yes. But there is a massive difference between a choice being real and a choice being uncaused.
To picture how this actually works, think about a massive, complex arrangement of falling dominoes stretching out infinitely.
Okay, I can picture that.
When we make a choice, the myth of the sovereign self makes us feel like we are a giant finger reaching down from the sky, pushing that very first domino to start a brand new chain reaction. We feel like we are introducing new kinetic energy into the system.
But we aren't the finger.
No. In reality, you are just a domino somewhere in the middle of this massive, sprawling chain. When you make a choice, you are absolutely knocking over the next block. Your actions have real impact and alter the course of the dominoes ahead of you.
But you're only falling forward because you were hit.
Exactly. The physics of the situation dictate that you are only falling forward because you were struck by the mathematical force of the countless dominoes that fell before you. The weight of your genetics, your upbringing, and your circumstances struck you, and you reacted. You are part of the chain, not outside of it.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. Your decisions matter deeply, but you are not the uncaused origin of everything that produced them. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you can start to see how these first two invisible walls support each other structurally.
Right, they lean on each other.
Completely. The just world hypothesis completely relied on the sovereign self to make the ledger balance. If you are the true, uncaused author of your choices, the finger pushing the first domino, then your suffering or your success is 100% your fault or your merit.
But without that sovereign self, the accountant's ledger just falls apart.
It falls apart. Outcomes still follow from causes, but those causes run so much deeper than personal choice, and the vast majority of what determines them was never in your hands to begin with.
It really is a house of cards.
Yeah.
But that raises a massive question. If this sovereign self isn't an objective biological reality, and if free will isn't this magically closed system, where in the world did we get the idea?
All right, who came up with this?
Yeah. If we aren't uncaused causers who built this specific map of human nature and convinced us it was the absolute truth.
That causal question bridges us directly into the third and final wall of the prison, the water we are currently swimming in. Psychologists and sociologists often use an acronym to describe the origin of this map, WEIRD, W-E-I-R-D.
Right. It stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And it's important to clarify for everyone that weird is not being used as an insult here.
Not at all. It is a purely descriptive demographic term for a highly specific cultural formation. The argument is that this particular culture, emerging from a very specific timeline of European history, produced a highly specialized picture of what a human being actually is.
It defined the quote-unquote normal human.
Exactly. Weird culture decided that the individual comes first. It decided that autonomy and independence are the absolute highest virtues. It built a framework where what happens inside of you as a discrete unit is considered more real and more important than what happens between you and others.
And then, this highly localized map was exported as if it were universal human nature.
Everywhere.
This idea of the isolated individual was handed down generation after generation. It was reinforced through our economic systems, taught as standard psychology in our classrooms, preached as personal salvation from our pulpits, and codified into the very fabric of our legal systems.
It was repeated so seamlessly and for so long that it completely stopped looking like a map. It just started looking like the territory itself.
To truly grasp how specific and constructed this weird map is, we have to deeply contrast it with relational cultures. And it's worth noting that relational cultures encompass the vast majority of human history and human geography.
Right, we're the outliers.
Yeah. Think of ancient agrarian societies or many indigenous cultures today, where survival depended entirely on the collective. In relational culture, the basic unit of reality isn't the individual, it is the bond.
That concept alone is such a paradigm shift. We are so used to thinking of ourselves as standalone
We
products.
really are.
In a relational culture, you do not experience the self as a discrete, isolated unit that exists prior to its connections. Identity isn't a private possession that you hold internally and then occasionally bring out to interact with other autonomous units.
So where does identity come from then?
In these cultures, identity exists in the relationship. You are a sibling, a caretaker, a member of the land. If you extract an individual from their community, their family, or their environment, they don't become a free individual. They lose what they essentially are. You are literally constituted by your connections. The network is the entity, not the node.
But trying to actually internalize that is remarkably difficult. From the inside of a weird culture, having a highly individualized, separate self feels like simple, undeniable realism.
It feels like common sense.
It feels like an accurate perception of gravity or weather. To use an analogy, imagine you were born wearing sunglasses with hot pink-tinted lenses. Because they've been on your face since the exact moment you opened your eyes, you look around and think, well, the world is obviously pink. That's just the natural color of reality.
Right, you wouldn't question it.
You have absolutely no idea that you're wearing frames on your face, filtering all the incoming light, until someone comes along and points out the physical hardware resting on your nose. We're swimming in this weird water, and because it surrounds us completely, we assume it's just the natural atmosphere.
It is the perfect illusion because the environment constantly reinforces it.
Yeah.
And this is where the genius of this entire framework fully crystallizes. These three invisible walls form a single load-bearing structure.
How so?
Well, the just world hypothesis needed the sovereign self to make the concept of total individual deservingness make sense. And the sovereign self needed the weird cultural frame to make that level of isolation feel obvious and natural rather than terrifying.
Oh, why?
If you pull on any single one of these threads, the entire structure is revealed for what it is, a construction. It is not an objective biological given. It is a localized myth that simply forgot it was local.
Okay, so we've mapped the prison. We see the just world hypothesis and its demand for a balanced ledger. We see the myth of the sovereign self and the reality of the domino chain. And we see the weird water we are swimming in. We see the walls and the bars.
Walls are visible now.
So how do we actually execute the jailbreak? What is the actionable takeaway here?
The conclusion to all of this is remarkably grounded. It starts by being very honest about what this knowledge cannot give you.
Okay, what can't it do?
It cannot magically rewire your brain to live in a world without the just world mechanism, because that process runs deep below the level of conscious control. Tomorrow, you will turn on the news, you will hear a tragic story, and that verdict will still instinctively assemble in your mind.
The search party will still go out looking for someone to blame.
Yes, and it can't give you a self that feels completely different on a Tuesday morning because the subjective biological experience of choosing and deliberating is still very real. Lastly, it cannot pull you completely out of the weird water because you are fundamentally a creature formed by the specific language, history, and economy. There is no magical outside for you to stand on.
Which honestly sounds a bit pessimistic at first, like we're just stuck.
It does sound that way, but wait.
Because then you realize the profound shift in perspective. The true jailbreak isn't about destroying the prison, it's simply the act of recognition. You can't unsee a mechanism once you've seen the gears turning.
That recognition is the turning point. Knowing that it is water doesn't magically drain the tank you are swimming in, but it does mean you finally stop mistaking the water for air. You stop believing the illusion that the game is functioning perfectly.
This isn't some complex 10-step self-help protocol. It is literally just the profound shift that happens when you stop spending your precious mental energy maintaining a fiction.
This raises an important question, though, right? For you, listening right now, what is the actual practical application of this knowledge in your daily life?
Right.
The application is a radical, almost disruptive kind of empathy. Imagine looking at a person who is in deep pain or someone who has made a terrible, destructive mistake and consciously choosing not to reach for the ledger.
Just bypassing the accountant.
Exactly. Imagine feeling that internal mechanism start to run, feeling the urge to find their flaw and simply saying, that's just my brain bargaining with chaos, and letting it go. By acknowledging the long chain of unchosen causes that led to their moment of failure, you open up a space of genuine connection between you and that person rather than judgment.
So what does this all mean practically when we turn that lens inward? Because for me, the most profound application of this material is how incredibly liberating it is when you look at your own life. Think about your own failures. Consider your missteps, the missed opportunities, the things you lay awake beating yourself up over at 2 in the morning. Imagine looking at your own history without that internal accountant constantly trying to balance the ledger of your worth.
It changes everything.
When you finally locate yourself not as this isolated sovereign unit that has to carry the weight of the entire world on its shoulders, but as a node in a massive web of relationships, causes, and histories, that you didn't choose, a profound tightness inside you begins, slowly, to release. You can forgive yourself for being a domino.
It is the lifting of an impossible manufactured burden. The prison doesn't disappear. The structures of our society, our justice system, and our economy are still built on these ideas. But you finally know it's a prison.
Right.
You know, it was built by human ideas, which means ultimately it can be changed. And most importantly, you realize you aren't alone inside it.
We've covered some massive foundational terrain today. We unpacked the just world hypothesis and how desperately we bargain with chaos. We dismantled the myth of the sovereign self and realized we are part of a long, unbroken chain of causes.
Yeah, we are.
And we named the weird psychology that convinced us we were isolated individuals in the first place.
Yeah,
The walls are finally visible.
they are. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Something to explore on your own that builds on this idea of the self being constructed by external forces.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
If our very concept of self is fundamentally built by our relationships, our environments, and the constant inputs we receive, what does that mean for the technology and the algorithms we interact with every single day?
Oh, wow.
As these highly curated feeds constantly shape our worldview, trigger our dopamine, and learn our deepest habits, are they merely tools? Or are they quietly integrating into our neurochemistry, becoming part of our actual self?
That's a wild thought.
As we spend more of our lives inside these digital environments, are we unwittingly laying the bricks for a brand new digital wall in our invisible prison?
That is a fascinating, slightly chilling question to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning the water you swim in.